There is a battle happening every day. Not outside, not in the world, but within you. A quiet battle between two voices, one that doubts, one that delays, one that criticizes, and another that pushes, that encourages, that reminds you of who you can become. Most people lose this battle before the day even begins, not because they are weak, but because they are unaware. They wake up and immediately fall into old patterns, negative thoughts, self-doubt, distraction, and over time those patterns become their identity. They begin to believe the voice that limits them, the voice that tells them they are not enough, that they are behind, that they cannot change. But the Stoics understood something powerful. That voice is not truth. It is habit, and habits can be changed. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius faced immense pressure, responsibility, and chaos, yet he remained calm, disciplined, focused, not because his life was easy, but because his mind was trained. He did not allow his thoughts to control him. He controlled them, and that is the difference. If you control your mind, you control your life. But if your mind controls you, everything feels out of reach. This is why the morning matters. Because before the world reaches you, you reach yourself. Through your thoughts, through your words, through your mindset. And what you say in those first moments shapes everything that follows. If you want more Stoic wisdom that strengthens your mindset daily, subscribe to the channel. Because everything begins within. 1. You are responsible for your mind. There is a truth that most people avoid. Your thoughts are your responsibility, not your environment, not other people, not your past, your mind. Most people resist this idea because it feels heavy, it feels uncomfortable, it removes excuses. But it also gives you something powerful, control. The teacher Epictetus taught that while you cannot control events, you can control your judgment about them. And that judgment shapes your experience. Two people can face the same situation. One feels overwhelmed, the other remains calm. The difference is not the situation, it is the interpretation. And that interpretation comes from the mind. This is why responsibility matters, because once you accept that your thoughts are yours to guide, everything changes. You stop blaming, you stop reacting, you start observing, you begin to notice patterns. The way you think when things go wrong, the way you speak to yourself when you fail, the way you interpret challenges, and once you notice, you can change. You can question those thoughts, challenge them, replace them. This is not easy, it requires effort, awareness, consistency. But it is possible, and it is necessary, because your mind is the foundation of everything. Your actions, your habits, your life. Each morning when you remind yourself that you are responsible for your thoughts, something shifts. You become intentional. You stop letting your mind wander without direction. You begin to guide it. And that guidance creates clarity. A strong person does not ignore their thoughts. They train them, they refine them, they improve them. Because they understand that a disciplined mind creates a disciplined life, because everything begins with awareness. 2. You do not need external validation. There is a silent trap that keeps many people stuck. The need for approval, the need to be seen, to be validated, to be recognized. And when that approval does not come, they feel empty, uncertain, not enough. But the Stoics understood something deeper. Your value is not determined by others. The philosopher Seneca believed that true peace comes from within, not from praise, not from attention, but from alignment with your own values. Because external validation is unstable, it changes, it disappears. It depends on factors outside your control. If your confidence is built on that, it will always be fragile. A strong person builds internally. They define their own standards. They measure themselves by their actions, their discipline, their integrity, not by what others think. Each morning, when you remind yourself that you do not need validation, something shifts. You become free. Free from comparison, free from approval seeking, free from the pressure to impress, and in that freedom you become stronger, more focused, more authentic, because now your actions are aligned with your values, not external expectations. This is where self-love begins, not in comfort, but in independence. In knowing your worth without needing it confirmed, because true strength does not depend on others. 3. You embrace imperfection. Perfection is a quiet illusion. It promises control, certainty, flawlessness, but in reality it creates pressure, fear, hesitation. Because when you believe you must be perfect, you become afraid to act, afraid to fail, afraid to be seen as anything less, and that fear keeps you stuck. The Stoics rejected perfection. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself that he was human, that he would make mistakes, that he would fall short. But instead of resisting that reality, he accepted it and focused on improvement. A strong person does not chase perfection, they pursue progress. They understand that mistakes are part of growth, that failure is part of learning, that imperfection is part of being human. Each time you make a mistake, you are given information, feedback, an opportunity to improve. But most people do not see it that way. They judge themselves, criticize themselves, limit themselves, and over time, that creates doubt. But a mentally strong person does something different. They reflect, they learn, they adjust, and they continue, because they understand that growth is not a straight path. It is messy, unpredictable, imperfect, and that is what makes it real. Each morning, when you remind yourself to embrace imperfection, you remove pressure. You allow yourself to act, to try, to improve. And that creates momentum, because now you are no longer waiting to be perfect. You are focused on becoming better, because growth begins when you accept where you are. 4. You act even when it feels difficult. There is a moment that appears every single day, a moment where you know what you should do, but you hesitate. You feel resistance, a heaviness that tells you to wait, to delay, to avoid, and in that moment, most people step back. Not because they are incapable, but because it feels uncomfortable. Effort feels difficult, action feels demanding, and the mind looks for an easier path. But the Stoics understood something most people ignore. Action is the cure for resistance. Not waiting, not thinking, not overanalyzing, but doing. The philosopher Seneca warned that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. We imagine difficulty to be greater than it is. We build resistance before we even begin. But once we act, something changes. The weight becomes lighter. The fear becomes smaller. The path becomes clearer. Because action breaks the illusion. A strong person does not wait to feel ready. They act, even when it feels difficult, even when they doubt themselves, even when the outcome is uncertain. Because they understand that action builds confidence, not the other way around. Each time you act despite resistance, you prove something to yourself. That you are capable, that you can move forward, that you do not need perfect conditions to begin. And over time that builds strength, real strength, not based on motivation, but on discipline. A mentally strong person does not depend on feeling good to act. They act first, and let the feeling follow. Each morning, when you remind yourself to act despite difficulty, something shifts. You stop waiting, you stop hesitating, you start moving, and movement creates progress. Progress creates confidence. Confidence creates control, because action is what turns intention into reality. 5. You choose growth over comfort. Comfort is seductive. It feels safe, familiar, easy. It tells you that you deserve rest, that you can delay effort, that you can stay where you are just a little longer. And for a moment it feels right. But over time, comfort creates stagnation, because growth does not exist there. Growth exists in discomfort, in effort, in challenge. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not seek comfort as a goal, they sought strength, and strength is built through resistance. The teacher Epictetus believed that difficulty is what reveals and shapes character. Not ease, not convenience, but challenge. Each time you choose comfort over growth, you reinforce the habit of staying the same. Each time you choose growth over comfort, you expand your limits. And those small choices compound. They shape who you become. Most people wait until they feel ready to grow. But readiness is a myth. Growth happens when you step forward despite discomfort. When you choose effort over ease. When you move toward what challenges you. At first it feels unnatural, difficult, uncomfortable. But over time, something changes. What once felt hard becomes manageable. What once felt uncomfortable becomes normal, and once it becomes normal, your limits expand. A strong person understands this process. They do not avoid discomfort. They use it. They see it as a signal, a sign that they are moving in the right direction. Each morning, when you remind yourself to choose growth over comfort, you shift your mindset. You stop asking what feels easy, and start asking what moves you forward. Because progress requires effort, and effort requires discomfort, but the reward is worth it. Strength, confidence, control. If this message is helping you embrace growth, subscribe to the channel, because transformation begins when you leave comfort behind. 6. You stay consistent with yourself. There is a quiet truth that most people underestimate. Your life is not shaped by what you do occasionally, but by what you do repeatedly. Consistency is not exciting. It does not create instant results. It does not feel dramatic, but it is powerful. More powerful than motivation, more powerful than intensity, because consistency builds identity. Most people rely on motivation. They wait until they feel inspired. They start strong, full of energy, full of intention. But that energy fades, and when it fades, so does their effort. They stop, they reset, they repeat the cycle. And over time, progress disappears. Not because they lack potential, but because they lack consistency. The Stoics understood something deeper. Progress is built daily, through repeated action, through discipline, through commitment. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius did not rely on how he felt. He relied on what he knew he had to do. Each day, without negotiation, without delay, a strong person does the same. They show up, even when it is difficult, even when it feels slow, even when results are not visible, because they understand that results are not immediate. They are built, quietly, over time. Each action strengthens a habit, each habit shapes identity, and identity determines your life. This is why consistency matters, because it compounds. Small efforts, repeated daily, create massive change. But you must trust the process. You must continue even when it feels like nothing is happening, because something is always happening. Growth is taking place beneath the surface. Your discipline is strengthening. Your mindset is shifting. Your identity is evolving. A mentally strong person does not chase quick results. They commit to long-term progress. They understand that consistency is not about perfection. It is about showing up. Again and again. Each morning when you remind yourself to stay consistent, something shifts. You stop relying on motivation. You start relying on discipline. You move from temporary effort to lasting change, because discipline is built daily. 7. You forgive yourself and move forward. There is a weight that many people carry silently, a weight created by past mistakes, regret, failure, missed opportunities, things they wish they could change, and instead of learning from these experiences, they hold on to them, they replay them, they define themselves by them, and over time that weight becomes limiting. It slows progress, it creates doubt, it keeps them stuck. But the Stoics saw the past differently. They believed in reflection, not regret. The philosopher Seneca encouraged learning from mistakes, but not living in them. Because the past cannot be changed, but your response to it can. A strong person understands this. They do not ignore their mistakes. They face them, they analyze them, they learn from them, but then they let them go. Because holding on to the past does not create growth, it creates stagnation. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength. It is the ability to release what no longer serves you, to stop punishing yourself for who you were, and start building who you can become. Each mistake carries a lesson. Each failure contains information, but that value is lost if you stay stuck in regret. A mentally strong person extracts the lesson and moves forward. They do not allow the past to define their future. They use it to improve it. Each morning, when you remind yourself to forgive and move forward, something changes. You feel lighter, more focused, more capable, because now your energy is directed toward growth, not regret. You are no longer looking backward, you are moving forward. And that movement creates progress, because growth begins when you let go. 8. You focus on what you can control. There is a quiet source of stress that most people carry every day. It is not always obvious. It does not always appear as something dramatic, but it is always present. The need to control what cannot be controlled. People, outcomes, circumstances, events. Most people spend their energy here, trying to influence things outside their reach, trying to force results, trying to control how others behave. And when those things do not go as expected, they feel frustrated, overwhelmed, powerless. But the Stoics understood something simple and powerful. Control is limited. But within that limitation, there is strength. The teacher Epictetus taught that some things are within our control, and some things are not. Your thoughts, your actions, your responses, these are yours, everything else is not. And once you understand this, something changes. You stop wasting energy. You stop chasing control where it does not exist. You bring your focus inward to what you can influence. And that shift creates clarity, because now your energy is directed where it matters, where it creates impact, where it creates progress. A strong person does not try to control everything. They control themselves, their mindset, their discipline, their reactions, because that is where power exists. Each morning, when you remind yourself to focus only on what you can control, something shifts. You feel calmer, less reactive, more focused, because you are no longer fighting reality. You are working with it. A mentally strong person accepts what they cannot change. But they do not remain passive. They act where they can. They improve where they can. They grow where they can, and that creates momentum. Because progress is no longer blocked by frustration, it is driven by action. Because peace begins when you focus on what you can control. 9. You become better every day. There is a question that quietly shapes your life, not what you want, not what you hope for, but what you do daily, because what you do daily becomes who you are. Most people think change happens in big moments, big decisions, big breakthroughs, but real change is smaller, quieter, more consistent. It happens in daily improvement, in small actions repeated over time. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius focused on becoming better, not perfect, better each day, a little more disciplined, a little more patient, a little more focused, and over time those small improvements created strength, real strength. A strong person measures progress differently, not by comparison, not by external results, but by internal growth. Are you thinking better, acting better, responding better? If the answer is yes, you are progressing. Even if it feels slow, even if it feels invisible. Because growth is not always obvious. It builds beneath the surface, in your habits, in your mindset, in your identity. A mentally strong person trusts this process. They do not rush it. They do not abandon it. They commit to it. Each day becomes an opportunity to improve, to learn, to grow, and those opportunities compound. They create momentum, and that momentum creates transformation. Each morning when you remind yourself to become better, something shifts. You stop chasing perfection. You focus on progress. You move forward, step by step, day by day. And over time, those steps create a new version of you, stronger, calmer, more disciplined. Because transformation happens one step at a time. Self-love is often misunderstood. It is not comfort. It is not avoiding difficulty. It is not telling yourself everything is fine when it is not. Self-love is discipline. It is awareness. It is growth. It is the decision to become better even when it is difficult. The Stoics did not speak about self-love in modern terms, but they lived it, through their actions, through their discipline, through their mindset. They treated themselves with respect, not by making life easy, but by making themselves stronger. Because strength creates peace, clarity, control. Most people look for peace outside themselves, in success, in validation, in circumstances. But it does not last, because true peace is internal. It is built through how you think, how you act, how you respond. And it begins in the morning, in the way you speak to yourself, in the way you guide your thoughts, in the way you prepare for the day ahead. Before the world reaches you, you reach yourself. You choose your mindset, you define your direction, you take control. And that moment, that small, quiet moment, becomes everything, because it sets the tone for your day. And your days become your life. Most people ignore this moment. They react, they drift, they follow patterns without awareness. But those who take control of it change everything. They build discipline, they build clarity, they build strength. And over time, that strength transforms their life. If you made it this far, it means something has shifted. A realization, an awareness, a desire to improve. But what matters now is action, not tomorrow, not someday, today. Take one lesson from this video, apply it in your next morning. Because that is where change begins, small, quiet, but powerful. And if you repeat it, it becomes habit, and that habit becomes identity, and that identity becomes your life. If this video helped you see things differently, if it gave you clarity, if it pushed you to take control of your mind, subscribe to the channel, because this is where you build discipline. This is where you strengthen your mindset. This is where you become the person you were meant to be. And when you change your mind, you change your life. Everything you want begins there.